The question I wanted to ask is that we've seen documents suggesting that the collapse of some of these banks were deliberate.
Yes.
And it is not related to what has come out this week about Unibank. We've heard and seen documents related to even facilities owned by Indum and other related personalities owning MFIs. Will your government, if you come to power in 2021, be interested in investigating the real cause of the collapse of some of these banks?
Yeah. The thing is, with some of the banks, we cannot say that everybody worked above board and did not contribute to the state in which some of the banks were. And so we need to investigate that and isolate that. But then we also need to look at the other issues. You know, was government too hasty because of some other reason that we don't know? I don't want to attribute bad faith to anybody. But like you're saying, there are little things that we're seeing. You know, I mean, recently I saw this Attorney General's opinion about the closure of Unibank. And the point is, if it's real, I don't know, and that's why I'm being very careful with what I say. If that document is authentic and the Attorney General said it's not legal to close this bank and all that, why would we have done what we did? And couldn't we have given the banks time to realign their position, bring them back on board? There are some that were moribund that you could close, yes, but I believe that there are some that could have been saved. You know, you close a bank because the owner has another case of fraud against him before the court. So because of that, you know, whatever investment he made in the bank must have been fraudulent. And so you close the bank. There are banks that were not insolvent, that were closed. You know, and so the question is, what was the underlying motive behind the closure of all these banks? It is important for the people of Ghana to know. And if we come into office, we're going to take every single, did they go through the procedure? What were the procedures they should have gone through? And if they didn't go through the procedure, I mean, people have legal rights that they can resort to.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, yes, you have been waiting for
exactly.
a long time.
My name is...
wow, I have a lot of questions coming.
My name is Eko Moses. I report for Bloomberg. Your Excellency, do you regret signing on to an IMF program that overlapped an election, given that you front-loaded all the, what I call the economic bitter pill?
Yeah.
Therefore, there's a school of thought that what we see now, the growth that we see, was a scientific consequence of the decisions that had been taken as part of the IMF program.
Yes.
So one, do you regret doing that? And then two, you're in a country where 50% of our revenue goes to pay debt. The rest pays salary. Then there's almost nothing left.
Is it 50%? It's more than...
Now it is more. Now we have leverage oil. It's gone. Cocoa is technically gone because we've taken loads of loans. Then gold is also on the verge of going because there's an IPO that is coming up that's reaching up to about 750 million.
Based on the royalties from gold.
Precisely. Yeah. Then the last bit is bauxite, which is also on the verge. All things being equal.
To the Chinese,
now, what space will you have to prosecute your projects in the event that you win the next election?
This is exactly what Ghanaians should know. That this government is mortgaging the future of this country for today's spending. You've listed them all. And that is the danger we face. Because look at Get Fund. They are mortgaging Get Fund receipts for the next, how many years? 10 years or so. And so it means that in future, there will be no Get Fund revenues to look at. They are looking at taking our 10% reserve in gold investments and our royalties and mortgaging it and taking loans against it. You see, for a government that said you can develop this country without borrowing, it is the greatest political con that Ghanaians have ever been subjected to. ESLA, which we introduced, which was criticized, was going to be collateralized for 5 to 7 years to pay off legacy energy sector debt. They came and decided that the structure we had put, they didn't want it, so they discarded it. Stanbic was the lead bank, and all the banks that we owed energy sector debt, we had taken off the penal interest, negotiated the debt with them, and agreed what the debt was to everybody. And so ESLA was going to be collateralized and based on a waterfall, everybody was going to get proportionally what he was due. They said, no, we don't want it. We'll float a bond. Today, as and when space comes in ESLA, like when they did the increase in ESLA, it's being mortgaged again to increase the length, take additional money and mortgage the bond. So we're going to continue paying ESLA for the God knows how many years more. It's mortgaged. We cannot remove ESLA because it has been collateralized for 10 years, 15 years or more. You see, and the point is every single fiscal space that you can use to leverage and put into production is being mortgaged by this government. A government that said we won't borrow and said that we had borrowed excessively. But the point is, whatever borrowing we did in my time, you could see the investment into which it was being put. You could see the infrastructure, you could see the roads, you could see the electricity, you could see the water. I mean, just tell me, 98 billion Ghana cedis down the line, show me what is there in capital expenditure in infrastructure. Show me one hospital. Show me a new secondary school. Show me a new water system. Show me roads. You just go and take asphalt and put it on an existing road and seal it, and then you say you're doing roads. What new road have you tackled? None. And so that is the danger that we have. And so for me, my thinking is not about the election and the biometric register and things. Yes, somebody will win. For me, the greater thing that occupies my thoughts is after we have won, how are we going to adjust the reforms again? How are we going to reform so that we can put this economy back on a sustainable track? You are right. I don't regret that we went into the IMF because we needed policy credibility. Whatever we did, our international partners said, how are we sure that you implement this, your homegrown fiscal program? We went to Senchi. We called everybody and said, come and let's think. We will need a fiscal consolidation program. MPP refused to participate. The day before the Senchi program, they issued a fiat and said that any of their members who participated will be sanctioned. So they didn't come. Osafo had said he would come, he didn't come at the last minute. The only person who came was Kwame PNM and a few, but others who were active members of the party didn't come. And yet it was out of Senchi that we got the homegrown fiscal consolidation plan that we took to the IMF, and the IMF signed on it. They hardly changed anything in our homegrown fiscal consolidation plan. And one of the things that I'm proud of is we reduced central bank borrowing to 5%. And then in 2016, we reduced it to 0. So everything that was financed under government's expenditure was based on government's own revenue. Of course, it took our fiscal deficit up to 6 point something if you look at the rebase figures now. But, I mean, you could see discipline coming into public finance. Unfortunately, that discipline has been destroyed completely. And we will do our best. Our policy working group is looking at the figures and seeing what we need to do immediately after we take over, how we can restructure and put the economy back on a sustainable path of growth.
My name is Norman Akwaheford. I'm with Joy Business at Multimedia. I wanted to quickly find out from you, knowing very well that the deficit now, as projected by the IMF, is around 7%.
Yes.
We know that the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the law says it should be around 5% or something.
Yes.
Good.
It should not go above 5%.
About 5%.
Yes.
Good. Great. Now, at the time government or the finance minister was going to Parliament, the IMF board had not met, and so the report that we see today wasn't available. If you were the president, I want to find out from you, what would you recommend is done? Are you going to sack your finance minister? Are you going to go back to Parliament to do some corrections? What exactly will you do? And then when it comes to the assurance that the president did give with regards to paying all depositors their funds, knowing very well that the receiver is in court, with some of the shareholders going after them, trying to, recover these things. If you were in that position, it's not just assurance you would have given to Ghanaians who are waiting for their money.
Well, I think that the president should be truthful with Ghanaians and give them a realistic time frame for recovering their monies. Because we're in an election year, he's creating the impression that Ghanaians are going to receive their monies this year. Everybody wants his money in the shortest possible time. And the president says, we'll pay you your deposits in full. That's what he said. And yet, if you look at the budget, there's no provision for paying. And if you look at the quantum of depositors, claims that have to be reimbursed, there's no way that these can be paid this year. And so the president should come out clean with Ghanaians and say, look, we can't pay you all this money this year. We'll try to reach this percentage of this year, and then we'll spread the rest over a certain period. Unfortunately, he hasn't done that. He hasn't given the time frame. So you're going to have a situation where getting to September, October, people haven't seen their monies. Because right now, the maximum they're paying is 20% of depositors' claims. 20,000 of 20,000. So if you have 1 million, you get 20,000. If you have 500,000 or you're 100,000, you get 20,000. And it's going to create, some dissonance with people when they realize that government is not in a position to pay them as quickly as they want. And I think that the president should come out clear and let people understand what the situation is. But the other point you made.
Yeah, with the deficit as it is now.
Yes. The Fiscal Responsibility Act was passed.
Yes.
And nobody forced the government to pass the Fiscal Responsibility Act. They went there and passed it and capped fiscal deficit at 5%. And there are penalties in there for breaching the 5% fiscal deficit. And so the finance minister is in a bit of trouble. If it turns out that the fiscal deficit is 7%, then he must submit himself to the laws of Ghana and pay the sanction thereof. And so the law has been passed by Parliament. I don't think that anybody is going to amend it and increase the deficit. It's there, it's 5%. And so it means that he's breached the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and he must submit himself to the will of the people of Ghana.
What would you have done if you were the president? What would you have done to your finance?
I would have abided by the law.
Okay. I am Maxwell Adumbila for Daily Graphic and Graphic Business. Two quick questions. One of our major problems as a country is election year overruns.
Yeah.
We've had it virtually since '92, and it's been with us. You have had that experience painfully in 2 election years. We are entering an election, and it's very keen. Normally, it is the ability of the opposition to win that pushes the government to either spend within or spend above to be able to win. Based on your experiences, what advice would you give the current government in order not to jeopardize the fiscal stance that we have now? And then 2, one of the challenges we also have relates to election cycle entrepreneurship, where when MPP is in power, you have certain block of entrepreneurs doing well. When NDC is in power, you have another block doing well. But for a nation to grow beyond the current position we are and bridge the poverty gap, we need to have entrepreneurs that can span the length of time that the country will exist.
Yep.
How can we break that gist and ensure continuity in local entrepreneurship? Thank you.
Fantastic question. Thank you very much. Election year overruns have been the bane of our economic management. And I think I talked about it in the 2016 State of the Nation address. And I said that we were looking to break that jinx and make sure that we maintain fiscal discipline even in an election year. Unfortunately, because we had gone into an IMF program, our thinking was that the IMF would have given us some fiscal space to make room for election year expenditures. Unfortunately, they didn't. And often election year expenditures, because of the costs of registration, the cost of all those things, you can go above the fiscal figures that you set yourself. And that is exactly what happened in 2016. Enough provision was not made for the budget of the Electoral Commission. And so eventually when the outturn came and the figures came in, the Electoral Commission's budget was not properly catered for in the budget. And that's why we had a deficit, which if you use the rebase figures now, is put at 6-point-something%. But we could have kept within budget if we didn't have those election-related expenses. Now, I find it strange that a government comes and says that we don't want any foreign funding for our elections. The government has said it. They say they're going to finance the elections themselves. And these are even years where we were getting foreign financing for some parts of the election expenditure. If you can get some financing from foreign and international community to fund some part of the election expenditure, you say, I don't want it. I don't know what thinking has gone into that. Who doesn't take free money? It says, oh, we'll pay for the biometric machines, or we'll pay for this part, or we'll pay for training. Why? I'll take it. But government says, we don't want your money. We're going to run our election ourselves. Now look at the costs that are coming already. It says new register, already 400 and something million. That is to change the data center, put the new equipment and all that. But that is not all the expenditure. Then now you have to train the officers who are going into the field. You have to deploy them to go and capture the registration of Ghanaians. That is bringing the cost to about 800 and something million, almost $1 billion Ghana cedis. Why would you do this to yourselves? And you say, oh, we don't want any foreign financing. That is what this government has gotten itself into. And already the IMF is saying that your possible end-of-year budget is going to end at 7%. If you add all this additional expenditure, and Electoral Commission hasn't finished yet. This is just the registration. After that, there are all kinds of other expenses, including election day expenses and all that. And so it is obvious that we probably would have an overrun. You know, there's already an overrun. I mean, because the budget deficit is 7%, then there's already, you know, it's higher than anticipated. And so if you add election year expenses, then that will be a problem. But we need to keep fiscal discipline, whether in election year or out of election year. And the way you can do it is if you can get help from people, and they say, we will help you to do training of your electoral officers. Why not? I'll take it.
The entrepreneurship.
Yes.
Entrepreneurs, yes. That is the bane of Ghanaian business. We like to categorize our business people. And so if you see a business, an existing business, we want to see whether the owner is NDC or MPP or something like that. And based on where people perceive you to be, you either not get assistance from government or government will be more hostile to you or something, forgetting that the private sector and these business people are doing part of government's job for it by employing people. Government is responsible for creating jobs. Now, if somebody has invested his money and created a business and he is employing 100 people, 200 people, you say because the owner is perceived not to be inclined towards the ruling party, you destroy his business. You're putting 200 people on the street and expanding your unemployment problem. You already have all these young people coming out of school. You can't find jobs for them. And then you have existing businesses that, by grace of God, have employed people. And then you say because they are not positively inclined towards your party, you destroy their business. You're cutting your nose to spite your face. And that is why I was accused by my party, you know, that we were too open and that we allowed MPP people to do business. Yes, why not? They are Ghanaians. It doesn't matter which party is in power. Everybody is a Ghanaian. Everybody is entitled to the services of this nation. Everybody is entitled to invest and make money. And I don't see why not. And so if somebody qualifies to do a job and it's a government job, give it to him. Look at what happened. They employed a new director of Ghana Health Services. Then some funny group petitions and say, oh, he's an NDC man. 2 weeks in office, they sack him because he's NDC. So if you are NDC, you are not a Ghanaian. And so when NDC comes back, and then we put the shoe on the other foot, and they appoint somebody and people petition and say, oh, he's MPP. So when a certain government is in power, everybody else from the other power are no longer Ghanaians. They are not entitled to benefit from the state. It doesn't make sense. It's absolutely, absolutely insensible. Until we open the opportunities to Ghanaians, no matter your ethnic or political orientation, this country is not going to go anywhere. Because 4 years, you get all the benefits, and definitely power will shift, as we've seen from 1992. Power will shift at one time or the other. It can be 8 years, it can be 4 years, power will shift. And so if you enjoy the largesse of government because you are positively inclined, and then a new government comes, and then your business suffers, and then another government comes and somebody's business prospers. That's what makes our growth not sustainable. Let me go quickly online. They've been waiting for a while. So let me take our online guest. From Victor Odoi. Mr. President, would you encourage a petition to the IMF and World Bank to review these discrepancies? And what would be the impact of these discrepancies on our economic management going forward? The IMF has published the Article 4 report. And so it's a public document. And so I'm asking the government to reconcile their figures and the IMF figures and tell us what the true position is. And so that's a challenge I'm throwing to government. I'm not going to petition the IMF. The IMF has already come out with what their figures are. So it's for the two organizations to reconcile their figures. Tulip Abdul, what will your new government do to address the development gap in the nation? It has always been Accra, Tema, and Kumasi. Yeah. Until we spread the development of this country geographically, we're going to have the problem that we have. There's a golden triangle, which is Accra, Tema, Kumasi. And so if you are from the east, you are from the west, you are from the north, everybody gravitates into that triangle. And that is why we're seeing population explosion in several of these towns. You're seeing slums and other, Sodom and Gomorrah and all that kind of thing. You're seeing kiosks everywhere. Because the whole nation is gravitating towards where economic opportunity exists. And that is why we need to spread out economic opportunity. In my Facebook Live I did before, I talked about staple crop processing zones. And I said that we're going to make agro-processing and agribusiness a focus of our next administration. And we're going to map out the country into the comparative advantages that they have in terms of agriculture. And so if it's a rice growing area, we know that we need to put capacity to process rice. And so we'll put rice hulling machines, we'll put factories that can mill rice and process rice and all that. If the major crop grown is ginger, we'll put a factory that processes ginger powder, ginger oil, ginger paste and all that for export. If it's an area that grows fruits, you put in a fruit processing plant that will do that. And all these with private sector, because government will support the private sector to be able to do it. What you need to do, and that's why we did the Exim Bank, to be able to give the private sector the equipment and the capital to set up and make money and pay the Exim over time. And so these are some of the things that we will crystallize in order that we spread out the development. I said in my Facebook Live that when you take, in economics, when you take location of industries, they do not conform to political delimitations. And so if you say one district, one factory, you're talking about political delineations. And so that's why government is having problem. One district, one factory doesn't make sense because the value chain in a particular industry can go beyond political boundaries. So better to isolate them as staple crop processing zones. And so if you have a zone that is doing good in cashew, what do? You put more cashew processing plants there. It might not match with the districts, but they'll be in the particular processing zone where they can process the cashew for export and for local consumption. And so we are not going to do one district, one factory. But if we come and they have some ongoing one district, one factories, we'll continue and complete them. But we will replace it with staple crop processing zones where we will take the comparative advantage of a particular area and we'll put the processing capacity there to be able to make full use of the potential that the area has. And we want more hospital roads from you, GM, and more E-blocks. And that's Corex. Corex is saying that. I believe that healthcare is important, and that is why we say in every district we should have a modern health facility. And I said that it can be from a health center to a polyclinic to a district hospital to a regional hospital. And so depending on the population of the district, it is possible that a health center, modern health center, will suit them. Depending on the population of the district, you need a polyclinic or a district hospital. So we'll do that survey and we'll make sure that every district has a modern health center so that people don't have to travel long distances to seek health care. E-blocks will continue the e-blocks that were abandoned. We'll fast-track them indeed so that we can ease the congestion in the secondary schools. And like I said, we're going to map out existing secondary schools that are in high-density urban areas. And we're going to take some of their land and build e-blocks on the school land. So you have 2 secondary schools on the same plot of land so that you can increase the capacity of the school to absorb more children. And then the other e-blocks will complete them so that children don't have to travel very long distances to be able to access education. And once we do that, it will ease the congestion in the existing schools. Benjamin Nyane is asking, the MPP claimed they inherited a bad economy, even though their senior minister made a contrary statement to that. What is your response to that criticism? Well, I would say that it is their perception of what they inherited. We had very serious challenges with the economy when I took over as president. We had a doomsday, which was the power crisis, because demand for electricity, outstripped our ability to supply. So we needed to solve that and increase generation so that we could pass demand. This was a legacy problem. It's not like when I became president, suddenly there was no more power. It was power demand had been growing, and we had not kept pace with the power demand. So it meant that we had to put in extra generation quickly. So we had to invest in generation. Then aside from that, one of the major challenges I had with the economy was single spine. 2012 was the year we started the full implementation of single spine, including payment of arrears for single spine. By the time we paid wages and salaries and paid interest on loans and things, we had about 73% of total tax revenue gone. And so we needed to adjust. And that is why in 2013, 2014, I had to implement austerity. It is not something any president wants to do, but you do it because it's in the larger interest. You get insulted, you get criticized, but you do it so that the economy can turn around. By 2015, 2016, we had begun to see that turnaround, to the extent that, like you said, I predicted that in 2017, we'll see 8% growth. The IMF agreed with me and said that in 2017, we'll see 8% growth. And that is because of the work that we had done. And so this government was just landed the 8% growth because of increased oil revenues and all that. All that work in the new oil fields was done by my administration. I remember the 10 field and the Sankofa field, there were issues between GMPC and the operators. And I called them and called my energy minister, finance minister, all of them from finance ministry and all of them. I called them. I said, look, you guys go to Akosombo. Go and sit there and don't come back to Accra until you come back with an agreement. And so that was the first time you had GMPC, Ministry of Energy, Finance, the operators and everybody. They went to Akosombo Volta Hotel, went and stayed there. By the time they came back, they told me, Mr. President, we've reached agreement. We've crossed the T's, we've dotted the I's. And that's how come the program of development for 10 field and Sankofa went to Parliament for approval. And we fast-tracked the bringing those oil fields into service. And I was able to commission the FPSO for the 10 field. We had finished Sankofa, but I had left office, and so President Akufo-Addo had the opportunity to commission the FPSO John Ajikum Kufuor, is it? Yeah. And so that was it. So that's it. And from Hekings Global, Ho Airport and dualization of Sokode to Ho have been left dormant. What will you do when you come into power? Like I said, we'll continue existing programs. What I think we should do is to put a moratorium on starting new projects. We'll have a priority investment program, which will have the projects we intend to undertake as a priority. But then we're going to look at existing projects that have been abandoned and work and finish those before we take on any major new projects. And so all these projects that are ongoing, Eastern Corridor Road and all of them, E-blocks, hospitals that have come to a standstill, all of them, we will continue them and finish them before we start any major new projects. But of course, projects like the new regional hospitals that I promised are projects that we'll start working on immediately. Dualization of Accra-Kumasi Road. We're going to Accra-Kumasi, Accra-Cape Coast, Accra-Aflao. We're going to do them on a BOT basis. And so there'll be toll plazas where the money collected as tolls will go to pay them so that they are not sitting on our public debt in the way that it is. Let's come back to my guest in here. Yes.
It's Eric Mawena with Star FM. So we've seen this government set up policies, particularly for the private sector. And so we've seen a ministry like the Business Development Ministry and the likes. First off, I want to pick your thoughts on how well these initiatives this government have implemented for the private sector has fared, looking at the fact also that in 2019, the ease of doing business reports, the country fell 4 places.
Yeah.
And so I want to pick your thoughts on that. And what specific policies do you have in store for private sector when you are to win the next elections? And then this week, there was news that came in that New Plan Company Limited was closing down because of lack of contracts from government, and you've made mention of the fact that state enterprises are struggling. What are you going to do? Because they also make reference to the point that in 2016 they sought to get more shares from government so that they can pump in some funds. They paid the money, but the shares was not given to them. Did that come to your attention as president then? And what will you do for companies like that that are finding some of these challenges?
Okay. We'll start with the initiatives for the private sector. And I don't think that you need a business development ministry to promote private sector growth. We had the Ministry of Trade that was handling aspects of it, finance was handling aspects of it, and all that. And I think that that is sufficient. I don't see what the business development ministry really has done in terms of boosting private sector growth. I already said that when I come, I'm going to close down some useless ministries. It's one of those I categorize as the useless ministries. And so sanitation and all of them are going to melt back into their original ministries. I think that with the 23 ministries we had, they did more work in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of private sector growth, than the current 100 and something that we have. Business development, Ministry of Procurement. You know, what do you need a Ministry of Procurement for? When you have a whole authority dealing with procurement, you know, sanitation, meanwhile the sanitation is worse than it has ever been before. You know, so some of these things really are not necessary. Monitoring and evaluation, I don't know what monitoring of what. You know, you can monitor from the presidency. You can have a monitoring and evaluation unit in the presidency. In Professor Mills' time, Tony Edu was in charge of monitoring and evaluation. He was in the ministry. He was a presidential staffer in charge of monitoring and evaluation. You don't need a whole ministry for that, you know. Then you have aviation, you have railways, you have transports, you know. And I said in the other time when I spoke that these were all in Ministry of Transport, manned by 2 women, Jifa Ativo and Joyce Bauer. And they did far more work than I'm seeing under 3 separate ministries with 6 ministers, minister and deputy, minister and deputy, exactly 7. So some of these things, I mean, if you ask people to sacrifice and, you know, cut their coats, you understand? The government must be seen to be doing it. You must reduce the size of government, reduce government expenditure, you know, so that people know that you are sacrificing along with them. If you balloon Office of the President expenditure to 1.9 billion, you know, that alone can pay some of the depositors. If you reduce government expenditure alone, you can pay some of the depositors who are owed by the financial sector. And yet, you know, you have Special Initiatives Ministry, you go and dig dams, the dams are drying up, you know, and those dams, I mean, people thought that they were meant for dry season gardening and things. The water is not enough. They say if they pump the water, within 1 month, that water will finish. So it is being used for livestock watering and then also for washing clothes and other things. But really, and that's what I was asking before when we were campaigning, that what kind of dams are you talking about? Are they dugouts? Because about dugouts, we know dugouts. And we all have been doing dugouts. When I was in office, we did 100 and something dugouts, under the Ghana Social Opportunities Program, GSOP, and others. We did a lot of dugouts all over. And those dugouts have been more viable than the current dugouts, And then the minister is frustrated. She says, 250,000. What kind of dam do you want? Do you want a Kosovo? But who put the budget of 250,000? You said you do dams for them. They didn't say how much the dam would be. When you came, you said, 250,000 per dam. And if 250,000 per dam cannot do a proper dam, are you blaming the people for complaining? So those are some of the things. It's not only Neoplan closing down. Many private sector companies are closing down. A businessman told me, he said several people are moving their businesses to Côte d'Ivoire. And some are just closing shop and leaving because the economic situation is not conducive to a lot of things. If you put your ears down, speak to the private sector, speak to the private businessmen, they'll tell you that their businesses are collapsing. It is a fact. I speak to the businessmen. Let the president call businessmen and sit with them alone quietly and ask them, how is your business? And you hear the tales of woe that people are going through. And so the government should not delude itself and say everything is rosy, it's never had the economy better. The economy is not better. You are cooking the books, creative accounting, and creating the impression that the economy is better. But the reality will hit you. And he says, if you're cooking the books, the reality of the economy will expose you. And the reality of the economy is exposing this government. Speak to any businessman and he'll tell you times are hard. Business is not doing good, Let's see, should we take, it looks like we've exhausted.
Yeah, I think I have a few questions.
Okay, we'll just take shortly 2 more and then I'll wrap up.
Okay, I would want to talk about the new bank note. I want to find out if both the Bank of Ghana and the new government actually made a huge mistake, or you think it's a good thing implementing that currency. I think the central bank has a great technocrat, and have professional men and women in that sector, and very knowledgeable, And I want to find out from you, what would you have done differently that would not result in the collapsing of, how do I even say it, about the new currency,
Okay.
Of course. What's your take, and what would you have done differently?
I think it was unnecessary to introduce the new notes. And the Bank of Ghana did not go through the procedures that we normally go through when we're introducing new notes. Notice is given in advance that these new notes are coming. And they give us the reason why the new notes are coming. Long before the notes come, they give us specimen of the notes. They are going to be in this configuration. These are going to be the what. Before the notes arrive, it takes time before the notes arrive. This time, you know what happened? By the time they were informing Ghanaians that they were going to give us new notes, the new notes were in the country. They had been received, they had been warehoused. Why would you want to ambush Ghanaians if what you're doing is legitimate? Ask anybody with inside knowledge. Those new notes were here before Ghanaians were informed that new notes were coming. Why did the banks refuse to accept them? Because there's a procedure you go through. You send an official notice from Bank of Ghana to the banks that these new notes are coming and that we are going to supply you with this number of new notes. These are the specifications. So the banks prepare and they receive the notes and they put them into the system. There are people who received the notes and were spending the notes even before the banks saw the notes. How is that possible? People were spending the notes already even before official banks had received the supply. All of us go to the banks and they say, the new notes have come. Would you want it in new notes or you want the old notes? And then you say, okay, give me some new notes, and then you take it. So where did these people get the new notes and started spending even before the banking system had gotten the notes? And the point is, I announced in 2015 that we were working towards a cashless society, and that it was my intention that by the year 2020, we will not accept notes and currency for payment of government business. And that if you wanted to pay government business, you either use a check or you did a transfer direct to government. And so we're going to discourage the use of cash in transactions. We said that you can't take third-party checks of more than 5,000 off the bank counter. That is to reduce people carrying huge amounts of money everywhere. So what is the sense in making it easier for them to carry huge amounts of money? Because now, with the 200 notes and things, you are encouraging a more cash use in the society. Because if I have to come and pay you, formerly the hassle of packing banknotes in my car boot and bringing it and sitting with you and counting it was a big hassle. And so I just tell you, I said, look, let's go to the bank. Let me do a direct transfer to your account. And then I do it. You go, your account is credited and all that. Now I can go to the bank, take the 200 notes. It will fit in a small bag. I come and put it there to you. You count it. And it's going to encourage the use of more cash. And the point I even made is, we've signed on to the ECHO. We have a new currency coming. What is the need to rush to introduce 100 and 200 notes? Today, we're having difficulty with those notes because you can't use it in the market. The whole market woman's capitalization, selling her okra, is 200 cedis. And you go and you're buying okra or something and you are holding 200 cedis. Her whole capital is not up to the 200 cedis you are using to buy the okra. And they say, no, it's for big transactions. But why would you make it easier to do those big transactions in cash? If they are big transactions, they should be done cashless. Big transactions must be cashless. It is the small transactions that you need cash. And 50 was the best note. Look at the dollar. The highest note is 100. And it has been 100 for God knows how long. Meanwhile, everybody uses dollar. The dollar, they could have introduced 200 and 500 notes. Euro introduced 500 notes. They've withdrawn it. They've withdrawn the 500 notes for euro. You can't have 500 notes for euro now. And so everybody is keeping lower notes to prevent, more cash transactions. Unfortunately, we are making it easier to do. You are the last person. Yes, quickly.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I already have mentioned this issue, but because you brought it up again, one of the ministries that you have tagged useless is the sanitation ministry. And coming from the sanitation sector also, I've heard the reactions. And it is not only the minister who is not happy, but the people, the NGOs in the sanitation sector are also not happy. And one of the things that has not come out clearly is what you will do in the absence of a sanitation ministry, how you handle sanitation. And then the last one is, and this one, if I don't ask it, I'll be whipped in the office.
Okay.
In government, you've had an economic relationship. Ghana has had an economic relationship with China. How would you describe that relationship? And then what would you like to do differently, or to which level would you like to take Ghana's relationship with China if you get opportunity to become president again? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Very quickly. We've run out of time, so I'll just... China has been a partner of Africa. I'll just say all African countries. We normally have the Africa-China Summit, where China pledges, a certain amount of money to assist African development. It's from China that you will get the kind of money that you need to do some of your infrastructure projects. You will not get that from many of the Western countries. And so China is a very useful partner going forward. And I think that we must continue to keep that relationship. Unfortunately, in my time in office, we had a few disagreements, with China. One to do with the Start Times contract. They were not happy that we abrogated it. And then the second one had to do with the deportation of some Chinese illegal miners. We deported almost 5,000 Chinese illegal miners. It was a very difficult decision to make, but looking at what was happening, we had no choice but to do it. But our overall relationship remained good. But those were the two little blimps that we had. But I think that we respect China. China has been a developing country, and China has always stood by developing countries. We have the same worldview in many things, and so that's fine. But the thing is, Ghana is open to everybody. We have our traditional allies, America, UK, and we have cooperation with all of them. UK, France, America, we were cooperating with them in the fight against terrorism, and so they were helping us with training and other things. So our relations with all countries are good, and we must make the best of any relationship that we have with any country. Sanitation, the point why I'm saying that the sanitation ministry is useless is that sanitation is a central function of local government. And sanitation is the core function of district assemblies. And so district assemblies are under the Ministry of Local Government. And so why would you take the core function of the local government and put it in a different ministry and have a different ministry administering the local government? And that's what I'm saying. When I win, I'll take sanitation back and make it continue to be the core function of district assemblies. Because it doesn't help to have it sitting somewhere by itself when the management of the district assemblies is also sitting in a different ministry. So bring it back and put it where it belongs and keep it as the core function of the district assemblies, increase their capacity, resources to be able to do the sanitation properly, and not have a minister sitting somewhere appropriating resources to a different ministry to do sanitation. What kind of sanitation are they going to do? And so we'll put it back in the local government ministry where it belongs. The district assemblies will be the focal points for keeping sanitation in their districts. It makes it easier if you decentralize sanitation, and it is the responsibility of the district to make sure that their district is clean. You are better able to manage it than if you put it under a national ministry that has a national overview of what sanitation should be. And inputs must be commensurate to output. And so if you look at outputs of a sanitation ministry, a minister, technocrats, everything separate, what is the output? Our city's cleaner. Name one major sanitation achievement that this Ministry of Sanitation has done. And yet when it was under local government, we did the liquid waste plants, Mudo. We closed down Lavender Hill when sanitation ministry was under local government. Today, they no longer pour raw feces into the sea at Lavender Hill. It was under local government in collaboration with the private sector. We did the compost plant to receive waste, and sort it out. We did it under the Ministry of Local Government. We provided skip trucks to all the district assemblies to be able to collect their waste from different parts of their districts. It was all done under local government. Just name any achievement that's under sanitation. It has done better than it did when it was a component of local government. And so I'm saying that I believe that it is better under local government. And if I win, that sanitation ministry is going back under local government. Thank you very much. Thanks all of you for joining me again today. It's been a useful session. And let me quickly thank my colleague journalists for the very insightful questions. I have highlighted just a few of the major problems afflicting the management of the Ghanaian economy under this administration. It is obvious that this government's reckless borrowing with abandon and misreporting of financial figures could have dire implications for our country. But for the IMF, these figures would not have been given to the international community. Needless to say, we have also raised similar issues about deliberate misreporting, but government will just not listen. There's an urgent need to change course and provide hope, certainty, sustainable progress, and opportunities for all Ghanaians. To the many Ghanaians who are reeling under severe economic hardships as a result of poor socioeconomic policies, I urge you not to despair. Do not lose hope. Keep hope alive. With the mandate that, God willing, we would be receiving from you in December this year, 2020, we'll bring prudence and discipline back to the management of the economy. We'll weed out corruption. We'll drastically cut down on the size of government. And above all, we'll remain honest and truthful to you. We will not deceive you. We will tell you what the plain truth is. We'll also ensure progress in the economy. We'll bring considerable relief to Ghanaians through our fiscal policies. We'll ensure stability in the currency. And additionally, we shall implement business-friendly policies through various incentives and eradicate the nepotistic approach of the current administration to payment of contractors and other business people who open the opportunities of this country to all Ghanaians, notwithstanding your politics or your ethnicity or wherever you come from. Furthermore, borrowing shall be kept in check, and funds so borrowed will be channeled into capital expenditure and productivity that benefits the generality of Ghanaians and adds value to the economy. I've indicated in previous sections that we'll dedicate our first year in office to complete abandoned projects before we start new projects. We'll wage a consistent battle against hardship and bring down the cost of living. We'll create permanent and dignifying jobs for the teeming youth, not ad hoc ones that lead to no productivity. Job creation will be at the heart of all our policies. Among others, we'll create digital jobs, and through major capital investment in health and education, we shall offer additional job opportunities for health and education sector workers. To investors and researchers out there, let me assure you once again, under my watch, economic and financial data will not be massaged. They will not be obfuscated to present a rosier picture than what is the case. We believe in this, and we believe with this we shall restore dignity, credibility, and certainty to the Ghanaian economy, and your investments will be secure. We shall carry out a comprehensive review of the banking sector crisis, budget for and pay in full all depositors whose funds are locked up and are going through suffering. We shall pay you in full. And so once again, I thank you for joining me this evening. And let me say a special thanks to TVXYZ, Join News TV, Wezo TV, and Class FM for the live broadcast that we have enjoyed. I thank you and see you all another time. Thank you very much.
The land is good, the land is fine. Diamonds in mine. Yet we fight, we cover it all in blood. Tell me why we wallow in the mud. Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa, we cry for peace. Africa. The land is good, the land is fine. Gold we have, diamonds we mine. Yet we fight, we cover it all in blood. Tell me why we wallow in the mud. Africa, 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 yeah. Mama Africa, we cry for peace. Africa, Africa, Africa,